What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Shoeing with Jude, episode 6. The other Hall of Famer. We're with Pat Reilly. Nope, not this Pat Reilly. The other Pat Reilly. Horseshoeing Hall of Fame, Pat Reilly, who is an associate professor at the new vet school in New Jersey, Rowan University, Shreiber School of Veterinary Medicine down in Glassboro. Before we talk about today's episode, couple of things. We are on the eve, filming on the eve of Las Vegas Grand Prix. Just showing my support for Lando. I think he's 20 some odd points ahead right now. So shout out to Lando. By the time this airs, we'll see where things stand for the F1 championship. So just giving Lando a little support. Thumbs up, buddy. Second thing I want to talk about is, I've gotten positive feedback. I've gotten negative feedback regarding this program. This, if you haven't seen episode 1 really gives you a more in-depth overview of what I'm attempting to do. Long story short, goal is using this platform to connect with farriers, owners, trainers, horse professionals to do future research, instruction, measuring techniques, a whole bunch of things that I hope to do on YouTube using these video content. I'm not sponsored by anybody. I'm not getting paid by anybody. And as far as I know, nobody's paying for this content. I do pay out of my own pocket to create this content, to edit the content. And fortunately, this is through a connection, a family connection. And I appreciate, Eric, the work that you're doing to put this together. Thumbs up to you. One thing that in my years as a farrier, and I posed this question to last episode, Dr. Maria Katzamani, is it's funny, you could have 100 clients and you could have one client that's never happy, and you're seemingly always focused on that one client. And what I'll say is, somebody has made a comment, and I've heard from other people about the intro. Again, is it this intro, what I'm doing now? Is it the car with the trailer and the this and the that, the music? Whatever it is, the reality is that you can take this device or this device and just scroll right ahead to whatever the content you want to get to. There are chapters that I've put up with YouTube where you can clearly see as you're scrolling ahead for you to start. The ones that have the highlighted time, that comes in, I think YouTube creates that when you hit certain viewer marks. So it could be like 15, 20, 10,000 views. More people who watch, the closer it gets to that. Something that I will attempt to do in the new year is define those markers where questions are, where certain answers are, the chapters. But for now, you're basically just going to have to, if you don't like the intro, if you don't like this, if you don't like that, just keep going. It's sorry. I'm not really quite sure. Like, I'm completely amazed by this whole medium and just the world that we find ourselves living in. Sure, I have gray hair. Nobody has an attention span anymore. So I tried to do something novel with the music. I grew up in a time where you have a beginning, an end, and a middle, but today I guess it's just like jump right into it. So if that's how you're prone, just take your mouse and just go bloop and scroll ahead. So, for those people that like the intro, thank you. I happen to like it. I happen to like the music. But again, I created it. I'm biased. Getting to today's episode, Pat Reilly is, as we said, Hall of Fame farrier. Was originally from New England area, but then probably most known for his time at New Bolton Center, University of Pennsylvania. Super knowledgeable guy, really at the forefront of doing a lot of the research projects, farrier education here in the United States. And I'm glad that we have a friendship and somebody that I've bounced many things off of. And again, I'll put the link to my article. I highlight Pat's help in the research study. We were both at the RVC taking the graduate diploma equine locomotor course a number of years ago. Pat talks about not only his evolution in the farrier industry, but he talks about farrier education, some of his hopes, some of the gaps that exist, and the gaps that exist in veterinary education regarding farriery. There is a lack of not only theoretical but practical teaching for veterinarians. And one of the goals in this part that Pat talks about, part one, is really what his mission is at the Shreiber School and some of the things that he's presently doing with the vet students. So, really grateful to have this network of people that I'm with, that I get to interview and I get to share these interviews. This has been a labor of love for me and those people that have been enjoying it. I appreciate you. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. I hope the content is good. And thank you. So, catch you next time. I hope you enjoy this episode and see you next time on Chewing with Jude. Thanks for stopping by.
My name is Pat Reilly. I am an associate professor of equine podiatry at the Rowan Shreiber School of Veterinary Medicine in Glassboro, New Jersey.
Give me a little bit of your background. I mean, we know each other, but for people that don't know you, I know you have a horse background, how you got into shoeing.
Yeah, I grew up, I've been a farrier for 35 years, which seems ridiculously long. I can't believe how old I am now. But I actually started out, I wanted to be a veterinarian. I grew up on a horse farm, and horses were something that my brother and I had to do. These were the chores, and I had no interest in pursuing any kind of education or any kind of career in the equine world. I actually was very sure I wanted to be a small animal orthopedic surgeon. And then when I was in my junior year at the University of Vermont, I took a course involving the UVM Morgan Horse Farm. And I found that I actually had a whole set of skills that I thought everybody had in horsemanship. And we were halter breaking weanlings. And I thought this is about the first part of college that was easy for me, that came well. And I was putting myself through school, so I took a semester off and went to farrier school at the Midwest Farrier School in Macomb, Illinois, with the thinking that that would look good on a vet school application. And I never went back. I shouldn't say never went back, but I changed my plans after that. I decided that being a farrier was a job that I really liked. I like being able to make my own hours. I like working with my hands. I like working outside of an office. And somehow I'm back working in an office and sitting at a desk a lot of the time now. But I enjoy the whole concept. I enjoy the challenges of farriery. And I very much, I think one of the themes that I find is I like working as part of a team. And I think that's a really important part of being a farrier, is you have to collaborate with a rider and a trainer and an owner, other farriers. And I kind of gravitated back towards working in a clinical situation. So I started out doing ambulatory farrier work on sport horses for about 10 years. And then I found myself at a referral practice in New Hampshire called Rochester Equine Clinic. I worked there for about 10 years and then started doing some work at the Tufts Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine. Then I had an opportunity and spent 20 years as the chief of farrier services at the University of Pennsylvania at New Bolton Center. And last year, I moved to Rowan to pursue what's become my passion, which is a bit of research and teaching, and how we can collaborate better and work and educate veterinarians better on what farriers do.
What are some of the duties? Like, I know the school is new. There's things are starting to be worked out somewhat. What are some of your duties and responsibilities right now?
So most of my job is clinical and teaching. Those are the two biggest parts of my job. That's 80% of my position. We are, from a clinical point of view, I'm back to being an ambulatory farrier. We don't have a large animal hospital yet, but I'm seeing cases out of facilities such as Dream Park, which is a horse show facility right in Gloucester County, right across from the Commodore Barry Bridge. So I do work there, and I do work farm to farm. I also am quite active in teaching here. It's an interesting thing to recognize, as we were talking about earlier, Jude. We have to teach vet students about everything from how to put on a halter, how to tie knots, how to pick up horses' feet. But I'm trying to do that in a way where I'm leading them into something else. It's not just picking up feet. I can have them hold a horse's foot between their legs. Stuff like that is something I think is really important that veterinarians are taught. We can't skip that over in their education, especially since fewer and fewer vet students, I think, are coming into vet school with the skill set that I took for granted coming out of my youth. I think growing up on farms is just not as common as it used to be.
From what you know, some of the other vet schools out there, is that something that they offer, or are you guys sort of doing something novel?
I think most of the vet schools are coming from a similar place, right? I think, all of our students, I think, have a little bit less connection with large animals. And I do think that's one of the challenges that we're running into, is that we have, I think, 70 students in our first class right here. By the law of averages and the national averages, we probably are lucky if 10% of those vet students want to pursue a career in large animal medicine. Mm-hmm. So right now we're down to 7 students that we have. And then from there, once people get out into practice, we recognize that probably, I think the latest averages were 50% of veterinarians graduating from school going into equine practice leave equine practice within 5 years. So I think, you have to be mindful of the fact that I don't think what we're doing is working well enough in either training or retaining equine veterinarians in the industry. There are a lot of reasons for that. But I can't come up with their schedules and their pay structures. I can only worry about the things I can do, which is teaching them what I think they need to know about horses' feet, managing that, see if we can make that an important part of the curriculum.
Okay. You're an accomplished farrier. You've recently inducted into the Hall of Fame, the Farrier Hall of Fame. You've done a ton of research. What keeps you motivated? Why do you continue to do this work and have the same interest and enthusiasm?
Well, I think the part of our job, and Jude, you certainly know this as well as me, is that we need more research. Am I in the Hall of Fame? Yes. Do I consider myself to be a good farrier? Depends on the day. I mean, none of us have all the answers. None of us have enough answers to really say, I'm an expert in, managing laminitis or managing this. It's a very, very complicated set of structures that we're dealing with, and horses experience injuries on a regular basis. I want to be better. And in order to be better, I need to know who to listen to. And the trouble is, we have so many centuries of anecdotal learning that we just keep chasing our tails in circles. So, something like, I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago that was focused on with a lot of barefoot practitioners. I have no problem with that. I think it works well. I think it obviously worked well for the Swedish jumping team. They won a gold medal in the Tokyo Olympics with the majority of their horses being without shoes. But this is an argument that we've had for centuries, over and over again. I mean, going back to Bracy Clark in the 1700s, like, we know this keeps going over and over again, and we're traveling in circles. We're not moving in a progressive way. And I actually think research is the way we get out of that. I think that's one that helps horses, it helps horse owners, it helps farriers, it helps vets. I think that's what we need more of in our profession.
Yeah. So I know you're very farrier education minded. I was up in
Yeah,
Canada speaking to a number of top Canadian farriers, and they say that's something that's lacking insofar as there are farriers. There is a fair amount of us out there that are always trying to improve our knowledge, which is going to improve our skill.
right.
What's some of the things that you're hoping to do, aiming to do as it regards to farrier education with this new position?
Um, Couple of things on that before you get. I think there are a lot of different ways that farriers improve themselves, right? And I think one thing that a couple of weeks ago, I was out on a weekend, I think on a Sunday, working on cases, trying to get caught up, which we all do. And I think I passed 5 other farrier trucks within a couple of miles of my house. And I'm thinking to myself, like, you'd have to be crazy to get into this industry. Like all the things that, people complain about, the work-life balance, none of us are spending time in our second and third homes. It's not like we're collecting and making huge amounts of money. I think we really work hard. The part that frustrates us is that everybody's got a different opinion about what we do. So I think, for me, and Jude, you were a big part of this. I think the biggest thing the most proud part of my background was our involvement with the Royal Veterinary College and the Equine locomotor research course. I think those are the kind of things that have lit a fire under me, and that's something that I really want to do here. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but I'm working really hard at trying to make a master's degree in equine podiatry here at Rowan University. And I'm trying to set this up in a way so that we are not only doing this here and helping New Jersey and Rowan, but I want to set this up in a way where we're collaborating with schools around the country, around the world. Different places have all these different rules, and I actually think, about how farriers practice. Do you need to be licensed? Do you need to have education? But I think, one thing that bridges all of this stuff is research. And if we can get our community of farriers and people that are taking care of feet, I shouldn't just say farriers, I should say also veterinarians, learning some of these things the same way and being able to communicate and learn from each other and pass that along. I think this has all the potential in the world, and I think it's long overdue.
Yeah.
We've always had this reputation as, farriers are strong of back and weak of mind, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know many farriers for whom that's actually true. You can't have your own business and do what we do without putting you can't be successful in this industry without putting a lot of yourself into it. Time, as I said, working on weekends. We're all trying to get better, but I think there are different ways of doing that. And I think somewhere along the line, there should be an academic branch of farriery, and I'm in a position right now where I can hopefully do something about that. So what we did with the Royal Veterinary College, I would like to take that and make that the template and expand on that, make that a master's degree, and see if we can bridge different thoughts and recruit people from around the world to be part of that.
Why do you think there is a disconnect in the states? Do you think it's because it's lacking regulation? I mean, do you feel that? And then, again, this is not to be. We're going a little bit off script.
Yeah.
Is regulation necessary to make that happen, or does that even quantify or make a good farrier? Right.
Well, the only place in the United States where regulation occurs is on the racetracks. And I would say in one of my previous jobs when I was at Penn, that was actually one of my jobs, is I actually had to license all the farriers for the racetracks in Pennsylvania. I We didn't pass everybody, so I suppose in that sense we did elevate the standard of care. But I don't think the care that you would see on racetracks is that much better than what you would see in any other aspect of farriers. In fact, I would turn around and say that a lot of the sport horses actually end up having a much higher degree of level of care and of level of training and understanding, and certainly in continuing education for what farriers are, what's expected of them. So I don't know that there's necessarily right now a strong link that I could say, yes, licensed farriers are needed. I think in the United States, we have a history of not having that, right? So we've never really had that type of system. There have been a few states, I think Illinois used to have a rule where they required farriers to be licensed, but it's really not part of how the farrier world has evolved in the United States. In the UK, it's a highly regulated industry. In Germany, it's a highly regulated industry. But we see a lot of the same problems in our education. So I don't think that's necessarily the path to getting better. I think what we need is what happened in the early vet schools in the United States is they were teaching veterinarians all about the concepts of shoeing horses. I think once that kind of separated out and they weren't no longer teaching veterinarians how to actually shoe horses, that created that disconnect where farriers essentially left the academic environment.
Mm.
And that happened, I think, really right up until about 20, 30 years ago. And you started seeing more of this in Europe where farriers started getting reintegrated with academia. There are a lot of reasons for it. I think the value of the horses, I think the level of importance of what we do kind of requires that we advance ourselves a little bit more. And this was an opportunity that started happening more and more. I hope we can continue that. Do I think we're ever going to have licensure across the board in the United States? No, I really don't. I don't think that's, we have 40,000 farriers in North America, and I think we would be creating shortages for that.
Mm.
But as we have a shortage of veterinarians right now, I do think there is a possibility that at some point we end up with almost a hybrid position where we start requiring some level of education and training for farriers in exchange for allowing farriers to potentially do some of the things that we don't have enough veterinarians to do right now.
Mm-hmm.
So these are very preliminary thoughts, and I don't want to make it sound like I have a plan to do all of that, but, repairing quarter cracks,
Right.
Gait analysis. There are burgeoning, like modern materials, glue-on shoes. We're learning a lot more. And I think as we go through that, for instance, I could say taking radiographs may have a lot of very useful things, but does that necessarily require a veterinarian to evaluate the posture of that? Or maybe we can start entrusting farriers to do some of those things if we go through a certain amount of education, training, and regulation of the industry that would allow for that. So maybe there is room for a hybrid position in there at some point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I know that's crazy thinking. Yeah, that's but
well, it makes sense to me. I mean, there's a gap,
yeah,
there, and somehow that gap needs to be filled. So
yeah, simple things like if you have a horse that needs to be sedated, it seems like right now we just don't have a lot of veterinarians, and
right,
it becomes very expensive to have a veterinarian come out and sedate a horse for the farrier and then leave.
right,
Maybe there is a room for
right,
finding a way for farriers to help administer that if
right,
we are sufficiently trained
right,
and regulated for that. So
right,
hopefully we find a middle ground in there.
right. Segueing perfectly into veterinarian farrier collaboration.
Yeah.
Depending on the farrier that you ask, it's kind of a hot button topic. What do you think? Like, where do you land on collaborative efforts? I mean, you've been in university setting, working with some top veterinarians in the country, surgeons. Now you're at this new vet school, doing this type of stuff. Where do you fall on collaborative efforts in your experience with veterinarians?
Well, I remember I started this by saying I like being part of a team. And I think, I like the process of collaborating. I like getting information from the rider and trainer about how the horse is doing. I'm a much better farrier. If you put a lame horse in front of me, I am a much better farrier if I have a diagnosis. And that's not my domain. So that's something where I say I have to collaborate with the veterinarian in order to have the best chance of knowing how to address whatever the pathology is that's causing the horse to be lame. The flip side of this is, the problem we have with farriers right now is, one, we just don't have enough research to know the answers of all these things and the impact of what we're doing. I think, as we said, in the United States, anybody can go out and buy some tools and call themselves a farrier. So in a perfect world, I think what should happen is the veterinarian is responsible for providing a diagnosis, and the farrier should be knowledgeable and skilled enough to devise a way to protect whatever structures are causing the pain. But we don't have that, right? So a lot of our farriers have not received training in that, and either the skill application of it or in the understanding of what we're trying to do, and even levels of understanding anatomy and functional anatomy and biomechanics. The flip side of it is that veterinarians don't have a lot of training in what we do. So on average, across the United States, veterinary students only receive 1 hour of education in farriery in vet school. That came from a study from Kirkerhead at Tufts. Actually, a couple of studies that's basically shown the same thing. There isn't one vet school. The trend in vet schools right now is clinical competencies, right? They want the students to demonstrate that they can give an IV shot, that they can identify lameness, that they can pick up a horse's foot. But there's no clinical competency for anything. Like no vet school even has a clinical competency for pulling off a horseshoe. So there's this big divide right now where farriers are not being trained and exposed to a lot of the things we need to be successful: biomechanics, anatomy, functional anatomy. And the vets are a step removed from what we do. In fact, I don't know how many vet schools we have in this country right now. It's somewhere, depending on the day and which vet schools are accredited and which are distributive models. They're getting upwards of 40 vet schools. There are only 7 schools, to my knowledge, right now that are currently employing farriers. So there's a real big disconnect in there. We have 70 students here. And as I said, if 10% of them go into large animal work, that means we have 7 students. And if half of them leave equine practice within 5 years, that means we have 3.5 students coming out of Rowan per year to work in the equine industry. And that makes it challenging for veterinary teaching hospitals to devote that amount of time to the curriculum to make them good at it. So I think we should be collaborating, but I think a lot of the first steps of that should be, we should be encouraging vets and farriers to work well together. And that seems to be a challenge. We have so many unanswered questions that, if I were giving advice to horse owners, which I do frequently, what I would say is find vets and farriers that work well together. Because that way, if you're going to be working off of anecdotes and opinions, at least you're starting with a team of people that are like-minded, that are sharing the same ideas. But that's different from knowing that we're doing the right thing. Somebody pulls shoes off of their horse and it does well. Great. I love that. But not everybody feels that way.
Right.
I would say, same thing with nail-on shoes, same thing with glue-on shoes, same thing with, all of our practices and everything in between. They are largely opinion-based in terms of what we're doing. And it's just tough to take 2 professionals out of any fields, drop them together and expect them to share opinions on these things. It's just a challenge.
Yeah. If we know through evidence, 70% of lameness, originates, presents in the foot, do you feel then that there should be some greater focus?
Oh yeah. I just explained how we got there.
Yeah.
But really, the people who I feel worse for out of this are the horsemen, right? Everybody, I'll say all the efforts that we spend, whether it's, finding a farrier with this certification, whether it's finding, we'd love to think that, this supplement was great and this supplement was, most of those are without basis and study right there. Your horse goes lame and we take balance radiographs. Are there any value in that? Depends on who you talk to, right? And I personally have a lot of questions about it because I don't think we know how a horse is supposed, should a horse put its foot down flat? I don't think so, right? And I think the research shows 68% of horses land on the outside of their front feet, 97% of horses land on the outside of their hind feet. And according to one study by Micah Von Heel, trimming didn't change that. So should that be a target goal for us? Depends on who you talk to. And I think these are the things that start all of these arguments. And we pretend like we know the answers to this, and we don't.
Yeah. Do you think, and this is just a recent thought from me because I'm going down my own sort of academic route again, like this industry has existed theoretically for 2,500 years. And the fact that there hasn't been a way to quantify or come up with some objective measure, in my mind, means that it's not really wholly possible. Maybe AI now can do that for us. What's your feeling about that?
I think 35 years of shoeing horses, right? And when I started, the most sophisticated data collecting tool that I had was one of these brass hoof gauges that was hanging in my shoeing box. Today, as you said, I'm taking videos of horses and using artificial intelligence to measure the symmetry of whether they're pushing off or landing, differently on their hind limbs or front limbs to within 2 millimeters of accuracy. We have, in-shoe force measuring systems. We have sensors that we can put on feet. We have three-dimensional imaging that we can use just modeling with, our phone, and just being able to, even the idea of just taking a phone and using slow motion videos and taking photographs, that's all different ways that we're collecting data. It's exploded so quickly, the technology, and it's only going to continue to improve. This is where I think we need the limiting factor now is us.
Yeah.
It's that we don't understand how to, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, Jude, because we've been through this, but like, how do you design a study? How do you understand the difference between an anecdote and a case study and, serial case studies and bigger, more valuable studies? That's what we need. But right now, the idea like, well, this horse was shod this way and it did really well, so we should do it again. Or like bring up the Swedish jumping team. And I'm sure you've run into this. I have too. People read that in the press and then they say, hey, we want, to do the same thing with that. So can we copy that? There are potential problems with that. I mean, those horses did have very different lifestyles. They did wear foot boots or wore urethane shoes that were, put on there, because they couldn't all handle it that way, but those made the press less than the story of barefooted horses won a gold medal. So this does require, this is how we get out of that whole loop of arguing that we've been in centuries, is we have to start, learning how to take this data that's now available to us and use it in a productive manner.